Hello, people. I finished a book. This one is The Army of the Potomac, subtitled A Stillness at Appomattox. And this is probably, the only one of the bunch that I had heard of before. This, Stillness at Appomattox. This is my fourth book in as many weeks by this Bruce Catton guy. He's award-winning. He's not a terrible author, but after reading 4 books by the same guy, I really need a break. I got another one actually that my phone is balanced on right now that I'm going to start on next. And as I mentioned before, I'm just beginning on the Civil War. I really just kind of ignored it my whole life. And a lot of this book covered the same ground as another Bruce Catton book called Grant Takes Command, and which is fine. That's how I learn. I don't have 100% recall on the books that I read, and I'm sure most people don't have 100% recall either. So rereading things, you're getting different stuff. It helps me to remember. I've got a few more here. These are all my father's books. I've got a few more here that I'm going to go through. I'm still experiencing a bit of poverty here, so I'm not buying any brand new books. But if I decide to continue with the Civil War stuff, then I will get the books that I prefer. Like I'm sure that there's entire books that have nothing to do with that have everything to do, that are only regarding like the mine or the crater, as it comes to be called, this attack that was outside of Petersburg, or I would love to find one that's just on Sherman's March. I would love to find one that's just on Sheridan, roaming up and down the Shenandoah Valley. That's all in the future. I got a few notes in here, so let's get right to it, and we'll get done with this. It's time for me to go to bed. I'm doing this in my bedroom. This starts out, this is shortly after Grant takes command. The Army of the Potomac had done nothing but march forward, fight some battles, fight to a draw or lose, and then go back, But when Grant took command, he marched them down after Lee, after the Army of Virginia, and they fought, and they continued to fight. He kept pressing Lee. They got to where the Confederates would fight behind fortifications, would fight in trench warfare, not unlike the First World War. Only they didn't have hundreds of miles of front line. They would at the most have like 35 miles of front line. But anyways, Grant kept pressing him, and it ended up with the surrender at Appomattox. So we read about the Battle of the Wilderness again. The Battle of the Wilderness, by the way, this is 380 pages. The Battle of the Wilderness, apparently this area had been fought over previously. I'll find out about that later. It was their first battle, and it's all in the woods. They call this the Wilderness, but really it was only like a 10 by 20 mile area of second growth forest. They go from there to Spotsylvania. They have another battle. These are all kind of inconclusive, but Grant keeps maneuvering. It's all about taking Richmond, and Grant keeps maneuvering, and slowly but surely, he makes Lee react to him all the time, which is not the way it was before with like McClellan. This note here says, I've read enough by this author to notice odd quirks. And I have the second sentence in the third paragraph. The young men of the Army of the Potomac had had many yesterdays to light their dusty way, but they did not talk about them. Okay, the only thing odd about that sentence is had. And I'm telling you, this author maneuvers his sentences to where he has had probably 100 times in this book. A lot of books you can read and you never run into had. I guess that's just me getting sick of this author. It's not really a big deal. We go through the mine and the crater again. I remember seeing a movie once where it was, I don't know, something that was like from the Confederate viewpoint, and these two buddies that had been in the Confederate Army, they're there when the mine explodes, and the scene shows them on the edge of the crater. The crater is full of Union troops, which does happen. These idiots charge right in and get in the fucking crater, and they can't even hardly get out of there. But it shows these guys on the edge of the crater, and then they jump in to fight with their bare hands, which probably did not happen. And I don't think the federal troops, or the Confederates, were on the rim of the crater. It just didn't go like that. Jubal Early is this guy that's in the Shenandoah Valley, and that's who Sheridan chases around for a while. They talk about Andersonville for a little while, and he's pretty fair. You know, the northern prisoner of war camps where they kept the Confederate prisoners were not any better. Andersonville, I guess, was horrible. Sheridan finally defeats Jubal Early, but Early, cat comes up and bites me in the leg. Early counterattacks and drives him back, and okay, you can stop biting my foot now. The fourth paragraph of all the things that happen while you're making a video, the cat comes up and bites you in the foot. Fourth paragraph, 1, 2, 3, 4. Beyond the lower ground, in their front and to their right, 2 or 3 miles away, distinct in the clear sunset light, they saw what one man recalled as a sight to be remembered, a lifetime. 2 divisions of Yankee cavalry massed in solid columns, drawn sabers flashing in the sun like streaks of flame, thundering down at a full gallop to strike the flank and rear of the Confederate line. Southern artillery fired desperately to break the charge, but the charge could not be stopped. The outflanked Confederate line curled up, and the cavalry took guns and flags and prisoners, the squadrons riding wildly over broken fields after fugitive Confederates. And it just reminded me a little bit of, I've got some notes here. I read a whole lot about the Napoleonic Wars, and Blucher ended up being my favorite officer from that time period. And Blucher would always write, "We cut them into pieces," and literally that's what they did. If cavalry catches infantry, you know, in the perfect way, or I should say caught, because we don't use cavalry anymore, that there was nothing they could do, and they would ride in there and slice them up with sabers. They finally figured out that if the infantry formed into squares, and you had your bayonets pointing out on each side of the square, a horse will not try to break a square. Horses are too smart for that. They won't impale themselves on a bayonet. This is my last note already. Bottom of third paragraph. Ah, the 11th Vermont claimed to have fired 12 rounds from one battery, overcoming the want of primers simply by discharging muskets into the vents of the loaded pieces. You could do that. Uh, During the Battle of Lake Erie, the the British, they had a brand new boat that they actually built in Detroit, called the Detroit, and they had all these cannon on there. It was a beautiful thing, but they were just, the American Navy was the same way. They were so unprepared. This is in the War of 1812, that they knew they were going out to battle the American fleet. They figured they were probably going to lose, but they had to do it. And when they got out there, they discovered that they didn't bring any fuses or primers. So every cannon on the Detroit had to be fired by shooting a pistol down into the hole. The Detroit ended up uh, making a pretty good account of itself until it got tangled up with another boat, and that's how the British lost that battle. But I'm going to start on this other one. This one took me a couple weeks to read because right in the middle it was just, that's the way Bruce Catton writes. He gives you all the boring information and leads up to the exciting end. The exciting end of this was only like 80 pages. All right, that's it. Thank you.